Tuesday, August. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Tuesday, August 24th, and the time is 7:03, and I'm calling the City of South Pasadena Natural Resource and Environmental Commission meeting to order. First, I'm going to read our public advisory announcement. The council chambers will be open to the public. South Pasadena Natural and our statement of civility, which is, as your appointed governing board, we will treat each other, members of the public, and city employees with patience, civility, and courtesy as a model of the same behavior we wish to reflect in South Pasadena for the conduct of all city business and community participation. The decisions made tonight will be for the benefit of the South Pasadena community and not for personal gain. And now I'll read our notice on public participation and accessibility. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order N-08-21 issued by Governor Newsom, the regular meeting of the Natural Resources and Environmental Commission on August 24th, 2021 will be conducted remotely and held by video conference as well as in person, I might add. Beginning in July, the city will resume. I think we need to update this, RP. What? Yeah. Resume in-person public meetings. The in-person virtual hybrid meetings will maintain transparency and public access while protecting the health and safety of the public. Members of the public have the option to participate in person or via Zoom using the following link. Under the Zoom meeting information, webinar ID is 821-9781-5444. Or you can go to the Zoom website and click on the link posted in the agenda for tonight. Or you may listen to the meeting by calling 1-669-900-6833 and enter the Zoom meeting ID and passcode when prompted to do so. For additional Zoom assistance with telephone audio, you may find your local number at the link provided in tonight's meeting agenda, which is posted on the city website. I'll now read our notice on public comment. The Natural Resources and Environmental Commission welcomes public input. Public comments will be taken live in one of two formats, in person or via Zoom. Members of the public may also submit their comments in writing for Natural Resources and Environmental Commission consideration by emailing comments to nrecpubliccomment@southpasadenaca.gov. Public comments must be received by 12 p.m. on the date of the meeting, which is August 24th for this meeting, to ensure adequate time to compile and post. Written public comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. Okay, this meeting has been called to order, and now we'll take roll call.
Commissioner Board.
Here.
Commissioner Hammond has an excused absence. Commissioner Law.
Here.
Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Siegel.
Here.
Vice Chair DeGiorgi has an excused absence. And Chair Jones.
Here.
And we have Council Liaison, Mayor Pro Tem Cacciati is here with us for a little bit. And staff tonight, Ted Gerber, Deputy Public Works Director, is present, and I am RP Kasparian, Water Conservation and Sustainability Analyst.
Okay, now we are going to, I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now I'm going to read our second public comments and suggestions notice, or we don't have to do that. Okay. Okay, are there any public comments at this time?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay. Moving on, we have our first item on the agenda, which is the draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And I believe Ted Gerber will be presenting that for us.
Can you hear me now? Okay, there we go. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. So I have a brief informational item for you tonight. Our draft urban water management plan. The reason we're bringing the draft plan to you here tonight is to provide both the commission and the public an opportunity to review this plan. It's part of the requirement to conduct a public hearing, which we will be doing at the next city council meeting. Our plan is to bring this plan to the September 15th council meeting. It'll be a part of that agenda. A public hearing will be conducted, and then the council will adopt that plan, which is part of the requirements, state requirements. But we want to go one step beyond that and provide it to the public this evening, also provide it to the commissioners to review. So the requirement is for the city to develop this plan every 5 years. The previous plan was in 2015. And this is the 2020 plan. It's attached in your agenda packet there. It's pretty lengthy. It's a good 200 pages, just the plan itself, not including the appendices. But it essentially requires the city to evaluate its water supplies for the next 25 years and take a look at what possible drought conditions may occur. Does the city have a reliable water supply? What types of water conservation efforts the city's undertaken? South Pasadena is in a favorable position that this part of the requirement because South Pasadena produces its own groundwater, treats and pumps it into the city, and we only purchase a very small percentage of water from the Metropolitan Water District to supplement that water when needed, when our facilities require it, when a reservoir is down or a wellhead is being maintained. And so the city has met the requirements, the minimum requirements as far as water supply is concerned, has met and exceeded the water conservation targets of the plan for the last 5 years. And so we have the draft plan here for you to review and hopefully answer any questions you may have. Even if not tonight, please just bring your questions to us and we can always respond and give you some input before the September public hearing and then adoption of the plan by the city council. So that's all I have for you tonight. Okay. All right, if there's no questions.
I have one
Oh,
question.
sure. Yeah.
When you say that the city of South Pasadena, I don't have really any knowledge of our water system
Oh,
other
okay.
than the fact that we pull from an aquifer. So when you say we have our own water, does that mean we tap from an aquifer?
Yes, it's a great
Okay.
question. So
And where does that aquifer come from? And
Uh,
is that in any danger of depleting at any point in time?
sure. So we South Pasadena as a city is a member of a San Gabriel Valley coalition of water purveyors. And so we pump our water out of the San Gabriel Valley water basin, which is managed by what they would call the Valley Water Master. And so we have prescriptive pumping rights to a portion of the water in that basin. And that's how we have wells in San Marino that we pump the water out of and then pump it into the city. And so many cities will purchase finished raw or finished water from Metropolitan Water District, is where we would pump our own raw water out of that basin, treat it at the well pumping sites, and then store it inside the city in our reservoirs and then distribute it to the residents. And like I said, we do purchase a very small amount of finished water from Metropolitan when needed. And then we also purchase a very small amount of water from Pasadena for the very northern part of the city that borders Pasadena. Just geographically, it makes more sense for us to supply that very small part of the city from Pasadena. And so with regard to risk, we're basically the risk is defined by that group that depends on that basin. And so we rely on the water master to manage that water, and we actually pay to have that basin replenished. And one of the replenishers is Metropolitan Water District. So we have relationships with both the water master and Metropolitan to make sure that that water, our prescriptive rights to that water are maintained, and that the basin remains adequate for the water supply for the valley. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I have one add-on to that.
Sure.
With that information. The water that's pumped into the basin, where does that come from?
There's multiple sources. One of them being Metropolitan, and then I don't have the other. I think it's two other sources that the water master can purchase water from. But if it doesn't come into the basin naturally from from runoff, then we have to purchase and replenish it. So so there's several agencies that manage that effort in terms of replenishing that basin.
I had a couple questions, Ted. One of them is, I did review the report.
Sure.
Actually, and I was surprised to see that it projects rainfall will increase in the coming 25 years from an average of about 18 inches in San Gabriel Valley up to 20 something. What's behind that? Because I've seen projections that indicate it will dry out. The weather will become drier.
I may have to double check that and take a look at that for you. There's two different sections of the report. One addresses like changes in the valley based on climate change and sort of increased intensity of storms. And then there's another section of the report that projects droughts moving forward. So I agree with you there in the anticipation that the report largely prepares for, say, like a 5-year drought, like an extended drought, and evaluates the city's water supply based on meeting that drought demand over an extended period of time. So I'd have to take a look at that and get back to you to see what section, what is being portrayed in that section that's saying that there's an increased rainfall, because I don't think that was the dependency for the water supply, was that increase runoff.
The other thing I was wondering about is, well, two questions really. First of all, the water that does come from Metropolitan, the replacement water, that's different than the water that we purchase directly from Metropolitan, or is it one and the same?
It is different. That's a good question.
Yeah.
The replacement water is raw water
Okay.
that eventually gets treated by our treatment systems, whereas the water that we purchase to supplement gets directly injected into our piping system. There is a chlorination system because the Metropolitan water is surface water,
Right.
whereas the water that we procure, we obtain ourselves as groundwater. And so there's different characteristics to that water. But yeah, and that's actually where the cost differential comes into play, that in many cases it's cheaper for us to pay for the Metropolitan raw water to be injected into the basin than to purchase the treated finished water that gets injected directly into the water system.
Okay.
And one other item on that, the purchase of the Metropolitan water, finished water into the system is managed through the upper district, exactly. Whereas we negotiate the water that's injected into the basin is done through Upper and Metropolitan, and it's like a separate effort. So those charges are negotiated through the water master, whereas the charges for the direct injection is through Upper District.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question I had is, in terms of that replacement water, is that coming from the Colorado River, or is it coming from the State Water Project, or both?
It's both. So the regional effort actually has its own urban water management plan. So our plan, this plan is more looking at the local perspective, whereas there's another plan that's not presented here tonight that takes a look at the regional. And there is a I don't have the details, but there is an allocation on both. But they work differently. And so the Metropolitan Water District has to plan accordingly about what's reserved from the state water project versus the Colorado project, and alter. And in fact, I think over the next couple of years, what I understand is that they're going to change that ratio to an extent that they haven't before, to increase the reliability through this drought from one source versus the other. But yeah, both.
Both. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Again, I apologize because I didn't have time to read the report, but I was wondering, does the water plan include conservation measures? And does the city have any interest in trying to find a way to conserve so that we're not putting any demands on replacement water? Because it would be really great as, you know, we move forward and try to do all our drought and conservation efforts, if we could move away from that. And I'm just wondering if the plan addresses that.
It does, yes. So the plan both addresses the minimum conservation requirements and evaluates whether South Pasadena meets those. And I think the minimum requirement was 150 gallons per capita per day. And in the 2019-2020 period, I want to say we landed somewhere around 128 or 138, so we're below that level. So it evaluates where we are with water conservation. And it also lays out the city's existing municipal requirements or municipal code for how conservation increases what they would look like. So we have a multi-stage, basically like a conservation increase that can happen. We're still on the stage 1, and I think we've been at that stage, I want to say, since 2014. But it's likely that we would have an increase to our stage 2, which would restrict residential usage in the city, and that would be triggered. There's requirements that trigger that, but I think it's largely in association with the conservation efforts that the water master has to take on. So if the water master, where we pump that water from, has to increase conservation methods, then we, as a holding pumping rights with that basin, would also move our level up to, say, stage 2. So yeah, there's I think it's chapter 5 in the report talks about water conservation methods with regard to state requirements. It's like SB X77, I think the state requirement. I want to say 2009 that requirement came into place. So it deals with that whole aspect of it. And then later on in the report, it also deals with our specific water conservation program, the enforcement, the levels of the stages that we would pass through. So it has a lot of good information on that.
Any more questions, commissioners?
And
Okay.
thank you very much. I'll say I'll get back to you on that one question about the rainfall. So terrific.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to our action. I think it's the only action item, well, other than approval of minutes. The recommendation from our ad hoc committee on our waste hauling services. Are you presenting that, Bill, or is RP? Okay, that would be great.
Bill, if there's anything you want to chime in on. go
Okay, I'll let you
Okay.
go ahead and I'll
All
chime
right.
in later.
Okay, so this evening, we have an action item before the commission. And that is to recommend that the Natural Resources and Environmental Commission recommend to City Council a citywide refuse service level, either curbside service or backyard service. So to give you all a little bit of background information, as you all know, with Senate Bill 1383, it is now required, beginning effective January 1st, 2022, for all residents and businesses to have organic waste collection services. In order to comply, we do need an amendment to our current Athens contract. So from that, City Council created the Athens Ad Hoc Committee. The committee has been meeting and they have been discussing some options, and it has been brought up the possibility of changing the city's current refuse service level from a backyard service to a curbside service during this time. And so they are now seeking a recommendation from the Natural Resources and Environmental Commission to recommend which service level. So I have in the staff report a few points just to make between the two different services. So as you know, currently the city of South Pasadena participates in the backyard service level. And what that means is that customers collect refuse, recycled materials, and green waste, and they have them in containers in their own backyard. Athens then picks up those containers with those small gasoline powered pickup trucks, and they are later emptied into larger mother trucks and transported to a materials recovery facility. So with this service, the customer is required to keep the containers in an accessible area in their backyard, and they only separate their green waste from the rest of their waste. So regular trash and recyclables are in one container and only green waste is separated. With this arrangement, there are no additional efforts needed from the customer. They have the trash in the backyard and that's it. No one needs to roll anything out to the curb. Athens does pretty much all the work for the customer. So this service has been in place in the city since 1996. And we are one of two cities in the surrounding area of the San Gabriel Valley that is serviced by Athens utilizing backyard service. So the alternative service level is the curbside service, which many people may know of, and that is the more popular one, where residents or customers would separate their waste into refuse, recycled materials, and green waste into containers that are supplied by the waste hauler, and they would roll out their containers to the curb on a designated trash day. These would be hauler-owned containers that the hauler would provide. And the containers would be picked up by semi-automated front or side loader trucks powered by CNG. And then they would be transported to the materials recovery facility. With this service, the customer is responsible for rolling their containers out unless they were to subscribe to a rollaway service at an additional cost. And so some other notes for your consideration. The city of South Pasadena does have a hard to service area. So in the areas up in the hills where we have really narrow streets, in those areas, if we were to switch to a curbside service, they would still need that backyard service because the Athens trucks can't fit on those streets. They would need those pickup trucks to go through. So this affects about 400 to 700 homes I also have here laid out a few uh, comparative analysis between the backyard service and curbside. You'll see that we have a fiscal impact comparison as well. We don't have an exact cost of what curbside service would look like in the city. So we are waiting on Athens to provide those details. However, staff did do a little bit of investigating with similar rates or in the surrounding areas that are using Athens services curbside. And we found that curbside service rates are approximately 20 to 25% less than backyard service rates. So currently the residential refuse rate for backyard service in South Pasadena for once a week is $48.98. And the average current residential refuse rate for curbside service in surrounding cities is about $37. And so you're aware these rates do not include the rate increase of 8.78%, which would be required in order to comply with SB 1383. So these are just the curbside service rates that are right now, and they don't include food scraps being allowed in the green waste containers. And then you'll see I have a table that compares the different types of service levels. Bill, if there's anything that you wanted to add on behalf of the ad hoc committee, please go ahead.
Sure.
Or we can start a discussion.
I'll just add a couple things. The thinking, I think, of the committee is that the composting requirement will raise the rates that we pay now up, and that by going to the curbside pickup, we actually might not pay much more than we're paying now. So actually, it would be a savings to residents. But I'm sorry, it actually would be a savings to residents potentially. We don't know that because Athens hasn't come up with the final figures on what that would be here. But based on what Arpi was saying, a review of other areas and what they pay, we think it would probably result in a savings, at least relative to the increase with the backyard service. The other thing I think that we talked about is that by hauling the waste, the organic waste and green waste up to the high desert to Victorville will add emissions of pollutants to the basin and greenhouse gases. And the rule is ostensibly being done to reduce greenhouse gases. But with the curbside pickup, we'll be eliminating the gasoline-powered truck trips. So that will offset, we don't know how much, the emissions generated by hauling the waste some distance for composting. And the other thing is that with the big automated trucks that would pick them up, they're running on natural gas now, but the waste hauling industry is making an effort to move to renewable natural gas, which would reduce carbon emissions because it is, after all, produced at landfills. And some of the waste haulers are doing this, and I believe Athens is interested in this, maybe using it to some extent already. So that would be a way to further reduce carbon emissions, from the waste management process. So we understand that there are some residents that may prefer the backyard pickup, and I believe there would be an option perhaps available to them at a higher rate. So that's basically the thinking of the committee at this point. So we're waiting for information from Athens about what the rate would be. And we've talked about the need for a transition period. Residents will have to be educated, and Athens will have to get the bins and change the equipment and everything. So it will be something that won't probably be done instantly on January 1, but probably, looking ahead into the next year, it would start to roll out if we move in that direction. So just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Bill. Does anybody have any questions? I have a few, but I would like to let
Just
you go
a quick
first.
question. So it also sounds like then we are adding a recyclable bin if we do curbside, correct? Which would be it would be 3 bins. It would be an organics, a recyclable, and a waste bin. Is that correct?
That is one of the options,
Yeah.
but we
An option.
can do just 2 where
2.
we have an organics bin, which would include food scraps, yard waste and things like that. And then a second bin that would be mixed recyclables and trash.
Right.
However, I believe we would prefer the 3 bins. Or I believe that the committee has discussed more so the 3 bin system.
Yeah, I think so. Right now they have these facilities where they put it all on a conveyor belt and people pick out the recyclable material, or it's done mechanically using, sensors and different processes. But yeah, three bins might be the way we would go. A lot of other cities do it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry. I personally would prefer that as well. I know that they separate it, but I imagine the contamination on a mixed bin is much greater than a separated bin. Do we have any numbers on that? On what the percentage difference would be for contaminated recyclables?
RP, have you seen any? I haven't seen anything on that.
No, I don't have any actual numbers on contamination. I have been told in general that when your recyclables and your trash is mixed in one container, you have higher levels of contamination and lower levels of recycling. So I don't have an exact number on that though. So I'm not sure if it's a significant.
All right, thank you guys.
So, excuse me. So there's reference here to the contamination fees. Those are fees we collect or fees we pay? And it wasn't clear to me. We collect based on the purity of our recyclable material?
So if we were to go to a 3 bin system, let's say, and the customer has, like landfill trash in their recyclable bin, and at first they'll get a warning, and then if it's continued where they're separating incorrectly or they're contaminating the recyclables, then Athens can charge a fee for that
To the customer.
to the customer. Yeah,
Gotcha.
like a penalty.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So that's just enforcement, right? And sorry, Bill, a clarification question on something you said. There's a backyard service for difficult to reach areas. Did I also hear you say that there's an opt-out procedure for other areas, or did I mishear that? Like, so people can opt to backyard service even if they're not in the difficult
Well,
to reach?
I think the committee has discussed this as, an option that some people may prefer. Nothing is at this point cast in stone.
I see.
I
So-
think it's more, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. It's more for people who are unable to roll their bins out to their curb.
Yeah, older people, we've discussed that, that can't, move these big containers. They're pretty easy. They're on, I don't know if you've ever done it, but,
Mhm.
on rollers. But, older people that might have trouble. Some people may just prefer it. Some people just may prefer it, I suppose. I don't know. I wouldn't, but there could be some people.
Right. So, so the savings we've discussed, these are savings per customer or per the
Yeah.
city?
No, for the customer.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's,
The customers pay for the trash. Yeah.
mhm. So we're not really recommending a one size fits all, but we're recommending what we think is the best sort of default plan for every resident. Yeah, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question because I know that we have several alleyways in this town, and they don't have, some of them don't have a curb cut along their
Yeah.
street, their frontage along the street. Would the trucks be able to access the alleys, or are they going to be having to pull their bins out to the street? You know?
Our committee has not discussed that
Okay.
per se. I know what you mean, but I can't believe that we're the only city with alleys.
No.
And and having watched these trucks, they are kind of intelligent, you know, they can see and or sense and move. You know, there's some range
Yeah.
of motion.
And I know, for example, in Berkeley, there's very narrow, winding, hilly areas where these trucks can access without any problem. So I'm wondering if that number of 400 to 500 households is just a ballpark, or is that something that was,
I'm not exactly sure if that considers those homes with the alleys. I know it kind of covers those
Okay.
hill area.
okay,
I'm not specifically sure if they also considered the alleyways.
okay,
But I would imagine that they could do that on a case by case basis. If that adds to the hard to service number, then yeah, but I believe for majority, it would just be regular curbside.
I really like this plan. I overheard you said like if you were gonna continue with the backyard service. That would be good for seniors and stuff, but that it might have an increase in rate. And I just worry about if it is for seniors who are usually on the fixed
Yeah.
income, how that,
Right.
if they, maybe there could be something for like a, you know what I mean, for older people. They're not
RP,
paying for
do people get the discount as seniors or people of limited income, you know, that you get on utility bills? I mean, I think the city offers that.
I can definitely look into that. I believe we do have some kind of a program in place for the water bills.
Yeah.
Let me see if that extends also to the trash bills as well.
Is the idea like we would kind of get sort of people used to recycling normally again and stuff like that before we head out to the composting organic waste stuff, just getting people kind of used to the idea of sorting again. Is that kind of the idea too, or am I?
Well, I
know?
think there would be an extensive outreach
Yeah.
and education effort that Athens would conduct. I think we've discussed that in the committee. And, you know, so there would be a lead time before it would become before the switchover would occur.
Do you think the switchover for the curbside system would coincide with the organics too, or is it,
It's
how does that work?
So it's likely that customers will have to start separating their food scraps before we're able to deploy out all of those barrels and
Mhm.
start that. Because this is effective January 1st, so we want to make sure we're compliant with the state mandate.
Mhm.
You may have to start with residents separating that out within their own containers. And then a few months after that, we'll get those. If we choose to go to curbside, we'll do like another rollout.
Gotcha. What about the folks who do their own composting and all that? Like, how does that, will that, you know what I mean?
So everyone is required to have an organic bin,
Okay,
whether or not you do your own.
okay. So whether or not you fill it is
What's that?
something else. I said if you whether or not you fill it is one thing,
Right.
or, okay. Gotcha.
well, it seems to me that the financial or the fiscal benefits and especially the environmental benefits are of doing curbside seem to be right in line with our climate action plan and our committee goals or our commission goals. I don't know do we need to, if we need to take action on this evening. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Actually, there was one topic we didn't discuss, which is well, maybe I misunderstood, but there was discussion of special extra fees for people in the hills or distributing those costs evenly amongst others.
Yeah.
That issue came up in the written report, but it's not consistent quite what I'm hearing about how people can opt out and have different plans. So
So-
I'm confused.
So we do have some areas in the city that are hard to service areas. For those areas, they would have to continue with that backyard service. So they could get the hauler provided containers. However, they can't roll that out to the curb because the
Here's room.
trucks can't get through. So you would still need the Athens employees to go in their little pickup trucks, go into their backyard, bring them out, put them in the trucks, and put the containers back. That does incur an additional cost. Whether or not that cost is going to be applied just to those residents who are in those areas, or if we're going to spread that out with all of the accounts in the city, that is something that the committee is discussing. And
Right.
we are waiting on Athens to provide those numbers of what the rates would look like either way. So we don't have those numbers, and I believe that the committee is hoping to hear your recommendation to add to their discussion of how they want to do that.
Do we want to make a motion that includes our recommendation on how to accommodate those residences up in the hills to make it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we should, but I don't think we've discussed that point.
No,
Yeah,
no, I just
sorry.
want to, I'm just saying that
Right.
that would be a solution to forwarding this on, but having our comments and concerns addressed as well.
Right.
Well,
I mean-
I had a question for Arpi or Ted. Originally, we were hoping to have these numbers to review at a committee meeting tomorrow, but Athens hasn't yet come through. Do we know when Athens will be able to provide those cost figures at this point?
So unfortunately, we're not sure. They're kind of going through their finance process and all of that because we had backyard service for so long calculating these numbers. It's as if they're calculating it for a brand new customer. And so they kind of have to go through the whole financials and all that. So it's taking a while.
Okay.
However, we have been following up with them consistently to make sure that we get these numbers. We don't have an actual deadline from them or a date.
I mean, personally, I would favor, depending, I would have to see the numbers, but some sort of amelioration, you know, of the rate impact on people, you know. I think, you know, through sharing the cost across all customers, but until you see the numbers, you know, I don't know if I would go for, you know, distributing that increase for them across everyone or some portion of it. It would to me, I mean, it would depend upon what those numbers look like.
Yeah, I can see how the numbers make a difference. I personally, you know, my sense is that when thinking about environmental impacts, that the users, you know, should tend to bear the burden. So whether it's, you know, if you live in a high fire risk area, you know, people are talking a lot now about maybe your home can't get insured and you should bear the cost for that responsibility.
Mhm.
I think there's a similar argument to be made for living in an inaccessible part of the city. You know, there is some environmental cost to that, and waste hauling might be considered one of those ways of sharing that cost. I think probably there's also an argument that most people who live in those places can afford it more likely.
Mhm.
This land is much more valuable.
Yeah, well, I just as a member of the committee, I would have to look at the numbers before I could say what I would favor. But I understand what you're saying, I'm happy to share that.
I mean, if we were talking about these costs, though, it sounds like the backyard service would remain the same cost except for the additional organics, correct?
I'm sorry, one more time.
The backyard service would remain the same cost except for that increase for the organics in 2022. So
It, not exactly.
not exactly.
Not exactly. Well, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Athens would have to provide us with rates for that. Because they are completely changing their, logistics and their model and all of that, it might be a little bit more costly than before.
Yeah.
Because, especially if you have, like the rollaway service where everyone else on the block is doing curbside, but we've got one person on rollaway. So that really affects their operations. And so it could be that it's an even higher cost. So we're still waiting on Athens to provide us with those rates though. So I wouldn't make any on that.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, they may lose economy of scale, that they have now.
I just have one additional question for either RP or Commissioner Kelly. On the organics, some of these lots in South Pasadena are quite substantial and there's a lot of vegetation generated. Is there a possibility for those customers to have additional organic waste bins, or how would it work in that situation? For example, I compost and I have organic waste bins and they're consistently full as well as my compost. So I'm just wondering, for some of the clients that don't compost, they're going to need multiple bins. How does that work? And I think, it's equitable. They should be paying for the amount they generate. But does Athens provide additional green waste bins at a cost?
Yes, I believe so. For
Okay.
residential, they do come in different sizes.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that they would be able to provide additional bins or bins at different sizes. And they
I
would be at different rates.
I believe a lot of those people use dumpsters and they pay more already
Yeah.
than I do. Yeah, I think quite a bit more. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing is we don't really feel comfortable without knowing the fiscal or the numbers from Athens. Is that correct? Trying to get.
Well,
Well,
there's the broadest question, right, of backyard versus curbside. But if we're trying to make a motion for a specific decision, does it have to be one paragraph, one sentence and that's encapsulated, or can we have our minutes reflect the discussion and our comments? Is that?
I'm okay with that as long as you all are.
Well-
Go ahead.
No, I favor the curbside pickup, I think, on environmental grounds and cost grounds for most people. So that would be my preference. The questions that come up about the people that can't use that and what they would pay and if that would be, cross subsidized. I think I don't know, RP, could that come back to this commission at once that information is available? Because it's not now.
Sure. Information for just that.
Yeah, the difficult to reach people, what it would and whether that would be shared or whether they would have to pay it. For a recommendation on that.
Sure, if the commission would like to table this or more information in order to make this decision, or is this separate from?
Separate.
item-
I see it as separate.
Yeah, I think
Sep-
it's separate.
Later.
Sure, if we could always bring it back as another discussion item. As an action item. To recommend to the committee. That's all.
Okay, I'm going to
you-
request a motion then
Either way.
um, regarding our approval of or our vote on approving curbside over backyard. Should we vote first?
Would you make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we vote first and then we can word the motion or word the recommendation. But just get a consensus on backyard over curbside first. And then we can word the recommendation to council to address the fiscal questions.
The wording first, but
Okay,
you make the motion.
okay.
The motion is-
I know. I was just trying to get a consensus first, but
I can make a motion.
that would be great.
Uh,
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion that we approve curbside pickup, but also the 3-bucket option for recyclables, waste, and organics.
Okay, I'll second that.
Can I get a roll call?
Motion to recommend a curbside service level with a 3-barrel option. Seconded by Commissioner Board. Commissioner Board,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Siegel.
Yes.
We have Commissioner Hammond and Vice Chair Georgie who are absent today. And Chair Jones,
Yes,
motion passes. Thank you.
thank you. Did we want to, at this time, make a recommendation or not make a recommendation, but add our desire to see the numbers come back from Athens and have an understanding of how it would impact unreachable customers and customers who are unable to accommodate the curbside service.
I mean, I guess I have a question on timing. So we're just a little over 4 months away from the first of the year. And it sounds like we have to be in place. I know you said earlier that we may not be completely in place with this contract, but it sounds like we'd want to get moving on this as quickly as possible. So, I mean, do we have enough time to even wait until the next meeting?
I can't answer that. I mean, it's dependent on Athens producing the costs and then, it seems uncertain exactly when they'll do that.
I guess if they're
Maybe.
holding up the process, who's going to bear the cost if we can't be compliant by the start of the year?
Well, I mean, I would defer to staff, but I'll just say, as I understand it, the Cal Recycle is going to exercise some forbearance initially
Okay.
in enforcement actions.
If
but-
I could add one thing, and I think RP might have mentioned it, is that Athens is committed to being compliant either with the curbside service or the backyard service. So even if backyard service is still in place as of January 1st, they would still do the segregation and move those organics to the landfill.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any other comments or addendums we want to add to our approval?
But
we move
maybe
on?
just, I just had a request for clarification if it does come back to us for the ad hoc committee, which would be to make it clear that there, it doesn't have to be some economy of scale to get a certain price. Like, does it have to be 90% of the city uses the curbside in order to get the rate we want? Or, that question is not clear to me because
Yeah.
what happens if 50% of the city opts out? Does it still make sense for Athens to do it with two different services? That's not at all clear to me. So it'd be nice to know that before, to make a good judgment, I think.
That's a good question, but I'm not sure that we would know how many people would opt out until we actually do it.
Well, it might be good
Well,
to, maybe it's a question for Athens. Do they put like
Sure.
some clause in there that makes that necessary, that we enforce, have a certain buy-in? Or
Yeah, I couldn't hear the question really clearly, but as far as Athens is concerned, there's no optional service. The only optional service would be that rollaway service where you basically pay more to have your bins taken from your backyard, put on the street, and then put back in, because basically the driver has to get out of the automated truck that's designed to do an automated route and do a sort of a backyard service model, even we don't call it that. The issue with the hard to service areas, as RP was saying, is that there is no way to do the curbside service in those areas. So they will maintain the same model they have regardless of what the decision is. Really, the decision comes down to whether that cost is shared or whether the cost is borne by those residents. And as RP said, we're getting both those models addressed with two different cost scenarios from Athens.
okay, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only way to have a higher level of service is roll away, or or having a different service is roll away, or being in a difficult area.
Yes.
And then the questions. Yeah,
And it's our
questions.
understanding from Athens, again, we're waiting on specific rates, but that the rollaway service on top of a curbside service is probably more than the current backyard service. Because as RP said, you're like, you might be one person on the street who has a different service that the driver has to take more time to get out. So it's not like a backyard service, which is aggregated across the entire city and everyone has the same thing. It's, individuals who have a specific service, so it's more expensive than their current backyard service model.
Right.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarification. Yeah.
Okay, unless anybody has any further comments, I think we'll move on. Our next action item is the approval of the meeting minutes for July 27th, 2021 meeting. Does anybody have any comments or concerns? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Can I get a roll call?
Motion to approve minutes by Commissioner Kelly, seconded by Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Board,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Siegel,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammond is absent today, and so is Vice Chair Georgie, Chair Jones.
Yes.
Right, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to communications. City Council liaison. Did you have anything you were going to report for Mayor Pro Tem?
I can do that during the staff liaison.
Okay. Commissioner communications. Commissioner Kelly,
None tonight, thank you.
Commissioner Bortz,
Nothing for me either.
Commissioner Law.
Yeah, so actually, I'll just briefly note, so last month I mentioned heat emergencies as an item of interest that we might consider, and my review of the climate action plan and the city's emergency operations plan, there was no reference to heat emergencies, which surprised me. And so I reached out and RB graciously provided some time to talk about some of the issues, and we talked about some specific small steps that we could investigate for preparing for heat emergencies potentially in this, current season, which was really helpful. And then she also recommended I reach out to the Public Safety Commission staff liaisons. So it's the police chief and the fire chief are the staff liaisons. And I had an email exchange with Chief Riddle and Chief Selinsky on how we could prepare for that. And as it turns out, the city's emergency operations plan gets updated every 3 years, and that cycle begins in the next few months. So it turns out to be quite timely. And so their plan in place to update the emergency operations plan already included reaching out to relevant parties and will include NREC. So I'm happy to say that we will be consulted, and hopefully we can provide some of the background relevant to the climate change or issues related to the environment for the Public Safety Commission. So looking if that comes up in the near future, I'm happy to help more with that. But I think the process is started, so happy to report on that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Siegel?
Nothing. Thank you.
Okay, I have one thing to share. If I can find my notes on it. The LA County is doing a parks needs assessment. And tomorrow night, I'm attending an online workshop for the West San Gabriel Valley. It's online. And it's at 6 p.m. And they're basically trying to collect enough public input to do a needs assessment. And they're really focused on making sure that the parks are, that the resources are distributed more equitably. And I think a lot of, even though South Pasadena has an amazing park system, I think a lot of our neighbors have some needs. And I'll be attending that in hopes of speaking up for some of our adjacent towns and even areas of our town that could be lacking. But if anybody's interested, you can register for it on their website. It's lacountyparkneeds.org. And again, it'll be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And that's all from me. Next, we have staff liaison.
Thank you. So we have a very exciting update for you all. Recently at the August 18th City Council meeting, the City Council heard a first reading again of the leaf blower ordinance. And it was very well received. We received a lot of supportive public comments, and the commission approved the ordinance. We are going for a second reading because we are required to do so on September 1st. So September 1st, City Council will have the second reading. It is expected that everything will go smoothly and it will be officially passed, and it will go into effect 30 days after September 1st. So very excited, and I wanted to thank you all for your hard work with getting this finally approved. I know that Mayor Pro Tem Cacciati is beyond thrilled and very excited and very proud of this commission. And so, and now the work begins. The outreach plan, we have a robust outreach plan that we've put together. We are working with the American Green Zone Alliance to have webinars as frequently as possible. We're aiming for every month or so to do those. We also have in-person demonstrations of electric equipment open to everyone. So if anyone wants to come by and test out different types of electric leaf blowers of different, different brands and all of that stuff, they can come by and check that out. So our next webinar is actually this Thursday on August 26th at 7 p.m. And it is a virtual Zoom webinar, and you can find that information in the agenda packet or on our city website, southpasadenaca.gov/environews. You'll find all of our updated information on leaf blowers there. City staff is working on creating a webpage dedicated just to the leaf blower ordinance, where we would have information on frequently asked questions like who does this affect, who, does the enforcement look like, what do the penalties look like, when does it go into effect, what are the resources out there, etc. After our webinar, we do have a in-person demonstration scheduled for September 15th. We're still working out the details on that, but it should be at Garfield Park, and we'll have a flyer, and we'll start promoting that at the end of this week, hopefully in English and in Spanish. I want to give a really great big shout out to Commissioner Kelly, who has been instrumental in helping us promote our outreach efforts and our webinars and resources and things like that. He took time out of his day to walk door to door and post flyers and send me samples of flyers and content and things like that. So shout out to Commissioner Kelly. Thank you so much for your help. And this is really going to be a big team effort if we're really going to push for this compliance through education and awareness. We really don't want to, issue penalties and all of that stuff. We really want to educate. So thank you all for your help on this, and we will keep you updated on the progress. And that is all for my. To do flyers. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely send you all the flyers if you guys would like to pass that along or post it on your social media, or email it to your friends or anything like that. It would be very, very helpful.
A quick question also, were there any substantial changes in the revisions provided to the council?
Sure. So we did have originally went to the council on July 7th. Council had a few issues with the way that the enforcement was written. They just wanted to make sure that because it's in the noise regulation, it was just default that the enforcement would go to the police department, and that violations would be deemed misdemeanors and all of that. So what staff did is we went back and we made it so that enforcement would be on a code enforcement officer. And then we have a very clear penalty structure that is in the ordinance itself. So that way, no one's going to jail over a leaf blower, no one's going to have the cops called on them and all of that stuff. So that way we want to make sure that this is equitable for everyone. No one is, scared or being, hunted down for using gas leaf blowers and things like that. I believe that was the main thing. We did add some clarifying language to make sure that it was clear that it was property owners who would be issued the violations. And also, if you're a tenant in an apartment building and you're not the one who hired the gardener to come in, you are not going to be the one facing that violation. So we clarified that. I believe that was the main change. Am I missing anything? Did we get that everything?
Yeah, that was, those were the main changes. There was an additional sound standard added to address a couple issues with, how you would evaluate someone not being compliant. There was, as RP had mentioned, a really robust outreach program was added. And in fact, we did request funds from the general fund to sponsor that outreach program, $25,000, so that we can produce store hangers and banners and engage in media and things like that. So it'll be a really big all hands on deck effort for the next year, because as this commission pointed out, it's best to have a longer outreach period and then reduce the enforcement impact at implementation time. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, both of you.
And that is all for my committee.
Oh,
Sorry, Ted, did you have any other staff communications?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, thank you very much.
okay. Upcoming events. We have, as RP mentioned, the webinar on this Thursday, August 26th at 7 p.m. that you can find on southpasadenaca.gov, Enviro News, and that's for the transitioning to electric landscaping equipment. There always are LA County Smart Gardening webinars, various dates, and that website can be found in the meeting agenda. The Metropolitan Water District turf removal and California native landscape webinars, various dates as well, and that link can be found in the agenda as well. And with that, I think it's time to adjourn this meeting at 8:14.